Well, today is Pink Shirt Day. It's a movement that began right here in Canada almost 20 years ago when two Nova Scotia high school students noticed that their fellow student was being bullied for wearing a pink shirt. They decided to stand up in solidarity with that student and stand up to the bullies by wearing pink shirts themselves. And joining us live this morning is mental health advocate Neskens Jr. Dorcelus to explain why the message still matters and how it's evolving and what parents can do right now to support and empower their kids. Neskens, always appreciate you being here. Thanks for the time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is an important day. Bullying continues to be an issue at schools. I've got two kids in elementary school myself. I see it. I deal with it. I know a lot of parents who are dealing with it as well.
Yeah.
But there are so many challenges to approaching it with principals, teachers, and then getting actual reactions, consequences, etc. is tough. What's your take on this and the challenges posed by this?
Yeah, no, thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show once again. I was here last year. We did kind of diving into the aspect of workplace bullying. So this year we're just focusing on the kids. So I've done a lot of different leadership training and a lot of different leadership environment. And one thing that I come across over the year is that whenever we have a problem that is very common, there are two things that is at play. Number one is process. Number two is perspective. So I'm just going to break that down very quickly.
Okay, let's hear it.
So when it's come to bullying, one of the challenges that we have is the process in which we addressed it. Most schools, the only focus that they have when it's come to the topic is always telling the bully to stop, stop, stop. But what happened when the bully doesn't stop? Yeah. The only thing that happened is that the victim, the target, continued to suffer the consequences.
Yep.
So in the changing the process, there are two things that I come across. The first one, number one, is to invest in youth emotional intelligence. How can we actually strengthen the self-sufficiency, the emotional self-sufficiency, so that when things are happening out of their control, they can continue to overcome? And number two, in process, it's learning to invest in their self-esteem. And self-esteem sometimes it can be a very complex subject, but the way I describe self-esteem is very simple. It's the combination of self-respect and self-confidence. When you pour into their self-confidence and you pour into their self-respect, they automatically, their self-esteem increase. I was at a high school one time that had 1,100 kids. The principal invited me to speak to the whole school. And then after my session, he said, we have a group of about 17, 18 students that are out of control. They have gone beyond every disciplinary action that they could take against them. Yeah. So he said, can you actually lead a session with just this group of youth? So I said, yeah. When we brought them into the room, we realized very quickly their reputation was a reality. They were out of the place. They're tearing the room apart. And we start diving into the session. And about 20 minutes in, we dive into self-respect. And one of the magic that happened in that room, they started being more quiet than the principal I've ever seen them before. And what I realized is that the moment they become self-aware of the lack of self-respect for themselves, they also pay attention to the fact that because they don't respect themselves, they don't respect others. So one of the key things that we can do is pour into those young people around the process in which we strengthen them so that they, number one, gain the awareness, but number two, be aware of how they treat others.
You're touching on something I find so fascinating because, I think sometimes you think that there are just some kids that are unreachable, unchangeable. They're just like, they're set in their ways. They've, either, have many issues that they just sort of are dealing with and can't sort of like remedy that. But you're saying you can get them, but there's got to be an approach and a tactic and a strategy.
100%. And this is why many times I reach out to the parents as well, because I tell the parents honestly, one of the things we got to realize is that children don't always learn from what they hear, but they often learn from what they see.
Yeah.
There's my parents' presentation is always get very heavy because it's a difficult conversation. Because when we look at it, sometimes I hear parents say, oh, my kids is out of control. I don't know why they are so mean. But the same parent, the same father that is often saying to his kids, don't use this tone of voice when you're speaking to others, is the very same parents that use it when talking to the spouse.
Yeah.
The very same mother that said, oh, I don't know why my kid says those mean things on social media, but they are the very same parent that when they are picking those kids up from school, they call their girlfriends on the phone and they, sharing some of the meanest thing about their co-workers, their neighbors, and their mother-in-laws.
Yeah.
So these are some of the aspect and behaviors of parents that influence those child behavior as well. So there is a key aspect on changing that perspective and having the parents to put the effort in being the example of what they would like the children
I mean, kids
to
are
be.
sponges. They kind of model their behavior in many cases after the parents. We're running a little bit short on time here, but I just want to talk about that overall message of anti-bullying today. And, you know, it's almost been 20 years of Pink Shirt Day.
100%.
Do you see improvements in the last several years? Do you have reason for hope?
Yeah, 100%. In Canada, we have made major improvement. I've seen and I've been exposed to the international community, and I can tell you that some of the things we are doing here in Canada goes actually far beyond outside of Canada. But one of the key things I like to share as we close, number one, is always around the perspective also of bullying. So the first perspective that we got to challenge is this idea that snitches get stitches, because that concept continued to keep a group of students quiet while their colleagues are being physically and verbally abused and nobody is doing anything about it. And the last one is this idea that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And every time I share this, you know, I get really emotional about it, because when I go to the school, there is a lot of pain between these walls of the schools. The level of suffering that these kids are going through. Our generation of youth have never been more isolated and more lonely than before. So there is a need to continue to empower them and encourage them to ask for help, and leaning into that help in also ways to remind themselves, and also to remind themselves that they are not a mistake. They are not here by accident. All of them are here. We are all created for a special reason, and there are great contribution that all of us have to put into this world. So we have to remember that we are not a mistake, but most importantly, reach for help so that our condition does not become our conclusion.
It's a great message. Neskens Jr., Dorcelus, appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks so much. Good to see you again this year. Thank you very much.